The story begins with a group of friends, Michael, Sarah, John, and Emily, who decide to spend the night in an abandoned asylum as part of a dare. They arrive at the imposing, dilapidated building just as the sun is setting. Michael, a tall, lanky man with a love for all things horror, couldn't contain his excitement. Sarah, a petite blonde woman, and John, a burly man with a shaved head, were both visibly nervous, while Emily, a redhead with a sharp tongue, was determined to prove her bravery. As they approach the front entrance, a sense of unease begins to wash over them. The heavy, rusted doors creak open with a groan, and they step inside to find themselves in a dark, musty lobby. The air is thick with the smell of decay and neglect, and they can hear the sound of rats scurrying in the walls. Their flashlights barely penetrate the darkness as they make their way through the labyrinth of corridors. They find themselves in what appears to be a waiting room with rows of rickety chairs and a reception desk covered in cobwebs. The walls are adorned with peeling wallpaper and faded posters warning of the dangers of tuberculosis and influenza. Sarah clings tightly to Michael's arm, while John's hands ball into fists, ready for anything. As they continue their exploration, they find themselves in the patient's wing. The rooms are small and cramped, with metal beds and rusted bedpans. They can feel the eyes of the past patients still lingering in the air, as if they are still trapped within these walls. Emily's sarcastic comments can't mask the fear in her voice, while John's gruff exterior starts to crack, revealing the unease he feels. As they make their way deeper into the asylum, they come across a room that appears to be a laboratory. The room is filled with strange medical equipment and jars filled with mysterious liquids. One of the jars contains a preserved human brain floating in a yellowish fluid. The friends are horrified by what they see and can't help but wonder what kind of experiments were conducted in this room. Sarah stifles a scream, while Michael's face pales and John's fists clench tighter. As they make their way back to the lobby, they notice that one of their friends, Michael, is missing. They call out his name, but there is no answer. They begin to search for him, but the asylum is vast and their flashlights provide little illumination. They can feel the weight of the asylum bearing down on them, and they can't shake off the feeling that they are being watched. Emily's voice raises in panic, and John's gruff exterior is gone, replaced with fear. As they prepare to leave, they realize that their missing friend is not the only thing that is missing. The front doors, which were open when they arrived, are now locked tight, trapping them inside the asylum of the damned. The friends frantically search for Michael, calling out his name and searching every nook and cranny of the asylum. They split up, each taking a different section of the building to search. Sarah, still clinging to Michael's arm, explores the patient's wing, while John and Emily take the laboratory. As Sarah makes her way through the patient rooms, she begins to feel a sense of unease growing inside of her. The eyes of the past patients seem to be following her, and she can't shake off the feeling that she's being watched. She calls out Michael's name, but her voice echoes back at her, taunting her. John and Emily, meanwhile, are in the laboratory. The room is even more unsettling in the dark, and they can't help but feel like they're being watched. They find a hidden door that leads to a basement, and they cautiously make their way down the stairs. The basement is damp and musty, with the smell of mold and decay. They find themselves in a room filled with strange, twisted experiments, and they can't help but feel like they're in a nightmare. As they continue their search, they come across a room with a single metal door. The door is locked, but they can hear something scratching and shuffling on the other side. They hesitate for a moment, but John, in a fit of bravery, kicks the door open. Inside, they find Michael strapped to a table, his eyes wide with terror. They quickly free Michael, who is visibly shaken by his experience. He tells them that he saw something in the darkness, something that wasn't human. He can't remember what it was, but he knows that it was evil. They quickly make their way back to the lobby, but they realize that the front doors are still locked tight, trapping them inside the asylum. As they try to find a way out, they hear strange noises coming from the darkness. They can't tell if it's the wind or something else. The friends are starting to realize that they are not alone in the asylum, and that something sinister is stalking them. They are trapped, and fear is starting to set in as they wait for what's next to come. The friends frantically searched for a way out of the asylum, but all of the doors and windows were sealed shut. They could hear strange noises coming from the darkness, and they knew that they were not alone in the building. They huddled together, trying to come up with a plan. As they were discussing their options, they heard a loud screeching noise coming from the basement. They knew that they had to investigate, and they carefully made their way back down the stairs. Once they were in the basement, they could see that the source of the noise was a door that was slightly ajar. John, being the bravest of the group, slowly pushed the door open. Inside, they found a room that was filled with strange, twisted experiments. There were jars filled with strange liquids and body parts, and there were tables covered in blood and gore. As they were looking around the room, they saw something move in the corner of their eye. They turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. The figure was tall and thin, with long, stringy hair and a pale, gaunt face. Its eyes were dark and empty, and it seemed to be staring right through them. The friends froze, unsure of what to do. The figure stepped forward, and they could see that it was wearing a lab coat. It was then that they realized that it was one of the doctors who had worked at the asylum. But something was not right. The doctor's eyes were dark and empty, and his skin was cold to the touch. He reached out a bony hand and touched Sarah's face. She recoiled in disgust and fear. The doctor then began to speak. His voice was low and raspy. He told them that the asylum was a place of great evil, and that they should never have come there. He said that the experiments that they had seen were not just twisted, they were evil. He said that he and his colleagues had been trying to create a new type of being, one that was beyond human. He said that they had succeeded, but that the being had turned on them. The friends were horrified. They realized that the asylum was not just a place of madness, but of true evil. They knew that they had to get out before it was too late. They quickly made their way back to the lobby, but the front doors were still locked tight. They were trapped, and the thing that was stalking them was getting closer. As they huddled together, trying to come up with a plan, they heard a loud screeching noise coming from the darkness. They knew that it was the thing that the doctor had warned them about, and that it was coming for them. They were trapped with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. They could feel the darkness closing in around them, and they knew that their fate was sealed. The friends were trapped in the asylum with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. They could hear the creature that the doctor had warned them about getting closer and closer. They knew that it was only a matter of time before it found them. John, who had always been the bravest of the group, suggested that they try to fight the creature. He knew that it was risky, but he didn't see any other options. The others reluctantly agreed, and they began to search the asylum for anything that they could use as a weapon. They found an old crowbar and a broken chair leg, and they armed themselves as best they could. They knew that it wouldn't be much, but it was better than nothing. They made their way back to the lobby, where they knew the creature would come through. As they waited, they could feel their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew that this wasn't the moment of truth. They were about to face their fears and the thing that had been stalking them. The creature finally appeared, and it was more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. It was tall and thin, with long, stringy hair and a pale, gaunt face. Its eyes were dark and empty, and it seemed to be staring right through them. John stepped forward, brandishing the crowbar. He swung it at the creature, but it was too quick. It dodged the attack and lunged at him. John stumbled backward, barely avoiding the creature's grasp. The others stepped in, fighting the creature with everything they had. They swung their makeshift weapons with all their might, but the creature seemed unfazed. It swiped at them with its long, bony fingers clawing at their flesh. The battle was intense and brutal, but the friends were determined to survive. They fought with all their might, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, they managed to subdue the creature. As they stood there, panting and covered in blood and sweat, they knew that they had won. They had faced their fears and come out alive. They knew that the asylum was a place of true evil, but they had overcome it. But as they made their way to the front doors, they heard a loud screeching noise coming from the basement. They knew that there was another creature down there, and that their journey was far from over. They steeled themselves for what was to come, knowing that they had to face their fears head-on if they wanted to make it out alive. The friends knew that they had to leave the asylum before the creature from the basement could reach them. They searched for a way out, but all the doors and windows were locked tight. They were trapped and time was running out. John, always the resourceful one, suggested that they try to find a way to the roof. He remembered seeing a skylight during their initial exploration of the asylum and thought that it could be their way out. They made their way to the roof, and to their relief, they found the skylight. But as they tried to open it, they realized that it was locked from the outside. They were about to give up hope when Emily, who had always been the strongest of the group, stepped forward. She used her strength to break the lock and open the skylight. They climbed out and onto the roof. The night sky was clear and the stars were shining bright. They knew that they were safe, at least for now. They took a moment to catch their breath and to take in the beauty of the night sky. But their relief was short-lived as they heard the screeching noise of the creature coming from the basement. They knew that they had to leave quickly before it reached them. They climbed down the side of the building and ran towards the woods. They didn't stop running until they were miles away from the asylum. They collapsed in a clearing, exhausted and wounded, but alive. They knew that they had survived something truly terrifying, and that they would never forget the horrors that they had faced in the asylum. They made their way back home, but they were forever changed by their experience. They had faced their deepest fears and come out alive. They knew that they would never be the same, but they were grateful for the bond that they had formed and the lessons that they had learned. They knew that they would always remember the asylum of the damned and the horrors that they had faced there.